Welcome, Ken. I am so excited to have you here today on our podcast, the Hyper Fast Agent Podcast. I'm Keri Shull, and this is one of my mentors, Ken Goodfellow. He is an incredible coach, been in the business for a long time. Ken, why don't you just tell listeners why I picked you as a coach?
Well, Keri, first of all, hello, and thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate that. I've been in the real estate business a lot of years. Started as an agent, was a top agent for many years, then started a brokerage company, had 200 agents, 3 offices, sold that, then started a team and built it to 11 people and sold that. So I'm into building and selling, right?
Yes.
and then been in coaching. I've had a coaching company for 18 years and very specific, only work with top producers, top teams, and top brokers. So there's a qualification to work with us, and I've kept it that way from day one, and always excited with the people like yourself that we get to work with.
Well, I want to say one thing about what you just went through. So I knew that I wanted to work with Ken. I went to an event, and you have events that you invite top teams throughout the country to go and learn. And yes, there's a few things that majorly impressed me from my first event. But the one thing I remember is Ken started asking all of us in the crowd, what's your exit strategy? What's your goal? What's your long-term thought? And so he inspired me to think about vision and what I wanted to create and the limitations that agents have sometimes. He's been down that road many times before.
Right, exactly. Whoop, there's my dog in the back.
Gotta love pups.
Yeah. But that's the truth. I mean, I believe that every business should be built to sell, because there's a time, where you want to move on and do other things. So I think that's important.
For someone who's starting in the business, what would your recommendations be to them?
Starting as an individual person, or not a team, right? Just as an individual?
Yeah, just as an individual agent.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think number one is you definitely have to have a vision of where you're trying to go. You have to think about not just showing up and trying to do the job, but you got to have a vision. What's this going to look like a year down the road? How am I going to get there? What are the things that I need to do? Because I find most people just jump in and then they're kind of lost because they don't even know where they want to go themselves. So I think having a vision is one thing. And I think learning skills is really critical. You've got to know what to say to people, because communications create relationships, and relationships create business. So the better skilled you are, the better your business is going to grow.
Okay.
And one more thing, I think you have to have good, strong goals that drive you and make you do what you need to do every day. I think that's really important.
So I like that. So chunking your vision down to daily goals that'll get you to your vision. And really, it's an accountability check, because I think one of the hardest things when you're starting out in the business is there's so many things you could be doing. I was talking to an agent today and she said, I don't like the phone. And so I go to meetings, and I said, well, let's do some math. Good for you for going to meetings, but you have travel time. You're sitting there for an hour. You could make how many phone calls in the time that you're spending. If you're having a really successful day, you might go to 6-hour meetings, right?
Right.
But if you're on the phone, you could talk to, 50, 75 people in that same amount of time. So if you're out there looking to build a business, I don't like the phone that much either, but get over it, right?
Exactly.
You've gotta use the time that you have to have it be the most productive for you.
Efficiency is critical if you're going to grow, because there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
And everybody works everybody has the same number of hours. So how do you become more efficient and effective? Yeah.
Yeah.
No question. Yeah.
Awesome.
But it's a huge opportunity if people get those things down and they learn to handle the phone. They learn what to say to people, because that's what creates the business in the end.
Yes.
There's no app out there yet that actually handles the emotional part of the business that I've seen.
I hope there never is. Then we'll all be in trouble.
There won't be.
Robots will be better scripted than we are, Ken. We'll be in trouble. So what would you say to someone who already has a team? Actually, wait, let's go back a moment. Let's imagine that they're starting to get to that level of success where they're thinking about hiring their first assistant.
Yes.
And there's probably a lot of people out there that they're thinking about it. They haven't developed the confidence yet that they can afford it, or that they want, I hear all the time from agents all over the country, I want to grow a team someday, but I'm just not there yet. Right. And I think a lot of times really what they're fearful of is the flexibility, giving up the fact that they get to decide what they do when they do.
Right.
So what would you say to someone who is considering hiring their first assistant?
Well, first of all, it's funny because people do think of that flexibility, as you were just saying, but then most of the time they're working 24/7. So they really don't have any flexibility. They really have no time, and they focus all their time on making money, which usually they don't make a lot of money because they're tired out. They're working all the time. So if you're thinking of putting an assistant in or hiring an assistant and you're not sure, I mean, there's a few questions I think you need to answer to yourself. Number one, are you maxed out at what you're doing right now? Or are you thinking about investing so that your life continues to be better because you have somebody helping you and you can use the leverage to do that? Really critical, because I think, and the other thing is people think that you have to hire an assistant and pay them $60,000 a year. You don't have to do that. If you're thinking of hiring your first one, you could hire somebody part-time or a VA or something. But you see, what I find a lot of people don't understand is there's a point where you can only do what you can do. You are maxed and you can't grow beyond there. And I always say to audiences, everybody's in the place that they're at because that's where they deserve to be at right now. See, they're maxed out at their thought process too. So in order to do that, even if you had somebody part-time or whatever to help you go to the next level, really critical.
So how do they know when it's time?
Well, if you're, like I say, if you're maxed out, if you want to grow beyond where you are, if you're spending all of your time majoring in the minors, I call it, photocopying, doing all the stuff that doesn't make any sense or make you any money. And, I think the most important thing is knowing that knowing that all of the things that you're doing, or most of the things you're doing, somebody else could do that and it would allow you to go out and sell more properties.
Absolutely. One of the things that I always remind people when they're at that stage is don't look at it from an annual salary. If you're paying someone $40,000, chunk that down. What do you need to pay them per month? Because they should pay for themselves in less than 3 months. So it's really, can you afford the 3 months that it will take for your business to explode by leveraging your time differently? And if you can afford that 3 months, then don't overthink it. Just do it.
100%. And I find actually it doesn't matter if it's a brand new team or if it's a new team or an older team or whatever. I find that people always think of assistants as an expense. Yes. See, I don't look at it that way. I look at it something that's going to allow you, or if you're a CEO of the team, it's going to allow the team to grow and make more money. I have so many people that I start coaching go, I can't add one more salary. Well, just a minute. Yes, you can. Because it's by not doing that, this is stopping you making hundreds of thousands.
Yes. I like that. You said something earlier that stood out to me, Ken. You said it's what their mind can handle. So basically what you're saying is it's a mindset. If your mindset is, and when I hired my first assistant, Ken knows me well now, but I wasn't maxed out. I wanted to be able to vacation a lot, and my mindset wanted me to be able to have that time and flexibility, and I saw it as that. So I hired somebody, and then that wasn't my first assistant. And my next hire was 3 ISAs because I don't like the phone, right? So it's also about evaluating your weakness. And if your mindset is clear on what your vision is and you know your weeknesses, then you need to hire around those. So you're doing the things that are your strengths.
100%. And that's what I was saying, like even when hiring an assistant, it is about your mindset. It's about where you're trying to go, right? And you can use that as an investment because for you, it was more time off. And so you were willing to pay that money, right? To have some time off, right, Keri?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, bring it on. I'm ready. But I'll be honest, I struggled with well, do I have to be in the office every day if I hire this person? Is that going to take away from my flexibility? What if I have a really fun night and the next day I want to sleep in? I was in my 20s, right? So I had a lot of fun nights then. I thought, well, do I have to be at the office at a certain time? And I was uncomfortable with the idea of hiring. And then as soon as I took the plunge, I was in the business for 2 years before I hired my first assistant. If I could have those 2 years back, I think about where my business would be today. So what I would say, if you're out there thinking about hiring an assistant, just do it. You know, you need one, you know, and if it's a little ahead of where you think you may be, you may have some capacity, do it anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. And when I want to move on, because your sweet spot is teams that are doing a lot of business. So that's what I'm super excited to talk to you about. But with hiring and training, that's also something I've gotten a lot of value over the years in attending your events. So what should someone be looking for in an assistant, and how do they set the right expectations to make sure that they set that person up for success?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, before you even get to the hiring, you really need a job description of what you expect these people to do. You have to sit down and have a strong job description. So when you're hiring to that job description. So when people come in, they know, okay, these are the things that we need to do. That's number one. Number two is, when you're hiring, you got to make sure that you interview enough people. You don't just take the first person that comes. You interview enough people. You check their references. That's one of the things I find most people do not do. They don't check the references. And I think it's really critical that you check their references. They know when they come in, this is the job that I'm going to do. Those are two critical things. And then obviously recruit every day. Tell people you're looking for somebody. It's not a secret.
Right.
So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you have a job description for an assistant that you feel is really good that you would be willing to share with listeners?
Absolutely. Yes.
That'd be incredible. That's one I hear all the time, and I'd love to look at it too and compare it to what we have, because I'm actually hiring everybody out there, I'm hiring a new personal assistant.
Beautiful.
And I want someone who's more of a chief of staff. That's a high level, high caliber, different thought process. So I'd love to take a look at that, and I'm sure everyone would find that helpful.
Absolutely.
One other quick note.
Yes.
What happens? What percentage of the time? I know Gary Keller says 50% of the time you're going to get it wrong. In your experience with all your team leaders out there, what's the percentage, if they go through the hiring process, they check references, they do everything right, what's the percentage of time that someone won't work out?
So I think 50 to 60% too. Sometimes it doesn't, but I think as the teams are getting bigger, there's a lot more sophistication. They're hiring recruiting companies doing that kind of stuff. So the level of the recruit that's coming in is much higher, and it seems to be much better. Probably brings it down to 30%. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who are firing their first assistant, that'll happen too, guys. What I would say, like, we had a guy who we interviewed, we talked to his references. He already was an ISA. We were so excited about this guy. He ghosted us at lunch. Like, somebody went to the bathroom, they came back, the guy's gone. We're like, you okay? Like, what just happened, right? So even when you get to the level where you have a bigger team, that's still going to happen to you. So what I don't want to happen to anyone listening, when you hire your first assistant, if they're the wrong person, that does not mean you're not capable of having an assistant, or you're not good at it, or it's not going to work. That just means you need to go quickly recover, just like when you're working with buyers and sellers, right? You have to have the mindset that you're going to get over it fast when the person says no. You're going to try and solve the objection. And if you can't isolate and fix, you move on to the next, right?
One of the things I tell everybody is hire slow, fire fast. Don't keep them around if it's not happening, if it's not working. Take your time when you're hiring. I do a lot of research on highly successful companies. And one of the things that I find out is that some of these companies, to get one position filled, will interview 200 people.
Yeah.
So they don't just they don't just take the first person that comes on. They interview and they make sure that they, some get them to come in and work and do all of these things. So I find that, go ahead.
You told me, you gave me a tip. Can you share that with everyone now?
You mean about coming in and spending a couple of days? Yes. So if you hire somebody, one of the things we do as a company, which I really think is critical, is you have the potential hiree come in and work with you for 2 or 3 days to see, and you can tell pretty quickly whether it's a fit for you or a fit for them. And 95% of the people will come in and do that. And I'll tell you, we've done it for years, and it's made a huge difference. At the end of 3 days, some people go to us, hey, you know what? You're not for me. Or they go, this is fantastic. We love it. So it gives you that option. But it also, I've hired, 1,000 people in my businesses. And I got to tell you that there's some that you think are right on. And then when they come to work, they're not that person.
No.
Right. And so if you've already made that commitment, then guess what? You're stuck with them. But if they come in 2 or 3 days and they're not that person, which happens, then it gives you an out and gives them an out.
Well, and that's why Ken's saying his teams that are highly successful are getting to the 30%, which, listen closely to that. You're not a failure out there if you hire your first assistant and they don't work out. It happens to all of us. And probably 50% of the time it won't work for you. But if you take Ken's tip, you might reduce that to 30% of the time. And every time we lose someone, it's expensive. It kind of breaks our heart a little because we put so much time and effort into training them.
Right.
Awesome. Okay. So now let's move to your sweet spot. Highly successful teams.
Yeah.
So what are a few of the tips you would say to a team leader who's listening that's ready to scale their business? Their vision is to really grow and succeed at a higher level. What are the things they need to keep in mind?
Well, so you're talking, they're already kind of successful and now they want to really go.
Yep.
So I think the first thing, again, is what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? Because I find a lot of people get stuck at that, what's happening, and they don't really know themselves. Well, I just want to grow my team. Okay, why? What do you want to do? What are you trying to accomplish? I don't know. I just want, okay. So number one is figure out what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. Second thing is the vision thing again, right? What are you trying to do and what's the vision? Because we do a lot of these in offices where we go for 3 to 4 days and we do a complete analysis of the team, right? And then at the end of the 4th day or whatever, we give a set of actions that need to be done. And there's always 2 things that stick out in my mind. Number one is nobody on the teams, and I'm talking 95% of them, know the vision of the team. They don't even know where the teams are going to go.
Yep.
That's number one. The second thing is everybody's paddling the boat in a different direction. So what happens is people will say to me, give you a perfect example. So when I'm in these in offices, they'll say to me, hey, Ken, I really like the owner, but he doesn't really seem to know what he's doing. And then the salesperson will go, this place is nice, but the assistants don't know what they're doing. And the owner goes, you know what? I can't get anybody to do what they're supposed to do. So now you got 3 people with 3 different thoughts and they're all paddling the boat, right? Or 4 people, whatever. Yeah. Well, the boat just spins around in a circle, never moves forward. So if you're going to build a team, I would say the vision, obviously know what you're going to do, but I would also say absolute job description so everybody knows what to do.
Clear roles.
Absolutely clear roles. And then make sure that people are paddling in the same direction. Make sure that everybody wants to move forward.
So, wow, that brings up a lot of thoughts and questions for me. I'm going to start with the vision piece. What if there's a team leader out there, and I know you're out there because I was in this position, and I think I shared this with Ken at one point before I did Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership. When I started, my goal was to be, and my vision was, we're going to be the #1 team in Virginia or Arlington, right? Arlington. Right. We're going to be #1 in Arlington. And at that point, that seemed like a distant thing. Well, then we became #1 in Arlington. Then it was, we're going to be #1 in Virginia. Then we became #1 in Virginia. And I was lost. I thought, well, what are we going to do from here? What do I empower them with? So for people who aren't sure what the vision is or what the next step or how to get the people paddling in the right direction, how do they figure that out for themselves?
Well, they have to figure out what they're trying to, this goes back to what are you trying to accomplish? Where are you trying to take the team? But most importantly, it goes back to really, what are you trying to accomplish? Because you can't create the vision if you don't know where you want to go. And that's kind of like thinking strategically, not just tactically. And most people think tactically in this business, doesn't matter how big they get. You have to stop and think strategically. 3 years, 5 years. What am I trying to do here? Because that's the only thing that you can plan around, put your goals around, create a vision around, is the strategy that you set. And Michael Gerber always says that you should spend 70% of your time on strategy and 30% of your time implementing. In most team cases, and it's one of the biggest issues I have as a coach to these big teams, is you still can't get the team leaders to strategize. They just are tactical workers. And so if you want to grow, you got to think strategy. That's the only way that I see it.
Yep, that makes complete sense. And then another question I had for you, when you're evaluating, and I've talked to a lot of people, we haven't done an offsite at my office with you yet, but I would love to. I hear a lot of people that are doing the debrief, and you're able to put your finger on the pulse of an office so quickly. How would you recommend a team leader evaluate whether their people are paddling in the same direction? How do they check in?
Well, I mean, first thing we do when we do an in-office is we have an interview with each person, a one-on-one interview, and we find out and we ask them questions, what's the vision of the company? How do you think it's going? What's happening? What kind of direction do you have? What's your job description? We want to know all the things that they should have in order to operate their own little department. And so once we figure all of that out, and we're able to see, hey, nothing's going in the right direction, then what we have to do is we have to sit down with the team leader, relook at the vision, relook at where they're going, and then reset that. But we're very good at, I've been doing this a long time. I can go in pretty quickly and see what's going on with the team, whether it's lead generation, whether it's partner, they have issues with the people, and these are all the things, whether their costs are out of line. These are all the things that are important, because so many people, I always say this, probably 70% of the teams make little to no money.
Yes. Some of them are paying.
You got it.
Why do they do that? Why do they do that?
It's ridiculous. It's like, I just did one, I was telling an audience the other day, I was speaking in Chicago. I told them, I don't get this. So they had 7 agents, or buyer agents, they called them. And every time a buyer agent did a deal, they lost $2,500.
Yikes.
They go, yeah. They said, the reason they called me is to say, we think we have a cash flow problem. I go, a cash flow problem? You have no cash. You're putting money in to keep your company going. Stupid. Doesn't make any sense. So they quickly changed all that. And, sometimes there's radical change if you're running a big team. I've had teams where I've gone in and said to them, you got to let 10 people go to restart. I love Michael Gerber. I think he's a great business guy. And he always says you need to reinvent and rejuvenate your team every 7 years. So for some teams, they've been around 25 years, and they've got the same 25 people doing the job that they started with 25 years ago. Well, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
I can't imagine how that works, just because I think so differently, that the idea of having someone in the same job for 25 years, I don't know how you would keep them.
Well,
I don't.
And that's an issue with a lot of teams. They don't keep redoing the job description because jobs change, right? And I'm always on this with teams, bigger teams. I'm always saying, every 6 months, look at your job description, because if your business is growing, that's a whole different job for other people, or you may need to add somebody. Right. See, the one thing with you, Keri, is that you're moving all the time. You're not allowing anybody to sit. You're moving. If it doesn't work, you move them. You try somebody else, you move it forward. See, that's a talent. A lot of people don't do that. And my hat's off to you, because that's how you run your business. Really important.
Thank you.
Well deserved.
Thank you. So profitability, you started to touch on that. What would be your key recommendations for a team leader that's listening out there, or someone who's starting off in the business? Because a lot of people are, and I'm just going to say it, they're just living and dying by Zillow leads. In my market, Zillow just increased the price per lead by 5 times.
Yeah.
by five
Yeah.
times. So
Yeah.
I would be paying the $2,500 to do a deal with Zillow as of November 1st. So what would you say to someone who's looking at their P&L? Hopefully they have a P&L. I know that's the first thing you
That's a
do, right?
big thing, right?
Yeah. But what
Well,
would you say to someone looking at their P&L that's going, oh, shoot, this isn't, the numbers aren't working. What do they need to
right.
strategize on first?
Right. So first of all, like there's top line growth and bottom line growth,
Mm-hmm.
and you need both, obviously. But you have to have enough revenue to come in to even do anything. And so let's presume that you're a good team and you have revenue coming in. First of all, you got to make sure that you're not paying all your money out to the agents, like I just talked to you about.
Yes.
And that's a big thing, And then you got to make sure that your expenses are in line, that you're not spending too much money. And then you should be making, a lot of our teams are at the 37 to 40% profit margin. But if we're just talking to big teams here now, there's also, because some of the teams are so big now, they're doing like, $1.5 million a month in business in GCI. They scale, right? And they're scaling the business. But they're scaling the business. So the profit line may not be as big. And so the profit line drops to even, 20% or 18%. But as long as you're scaling and growing the top line of the business and still have, you can still watch the expense line that you don't go over. It's not always 30%. In other words, if you're scaling and growing bigger, you're obviously, your bottom line it moves a bit. But that's where you got to really pay attention. And teams that I coach that are doing that kind of business, I mean, some of them have $300,000, $400,000 a month in operating costs. So if they don't pay attention, they got you. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you don't pay attention and you're off by percentages, that can really put you in a cash situation, right? And
yes.
Everybody goes through that, by the way, that's building businesses, you, me, everybody. So you got to really watch when you're scaling that you don't go over the line, but there is an understanding that it's not all 40% profits.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would be your recommendation to teams out there? What's the percentage that they should be paying a buyer's agent, a listing agent?
Well,
is there any rule of thumb there?
Well, I mean, I guess if we were to, there's no rule of thumb. I mean, some teams pay 30% to their agents and the agents love it there. And some pay 60% or 50%. I think there has to be a kind of a scale of two. One, if you give them the business, and one, if they bring in the business. Okay. So let's say if you give them the business, you get 60, they get 40, or if they bring it in, they get 60, you get 40. So that there's at least an incentive there to go and get business.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I fought that for a lot of years because I felt like what would happen on my team is, if I reward them for bringing their own business, they're not going to pay as much attention to my business. And what I found is that's not true. It's not true. So we've actually changed our model, and now we have a cap on their own business. So that way, from a recruiting perspective, we're recruiting agents that are already doing 15 million in volume, and they're excited about the team because they can't figure out how to get to the next level.
Awesome. Right? And that's great because now you've gone to a different level of agent.
Yes.
With the experienced agents. So they're going to bring in business. It doesn't matter what, but I think that if you're the biggest thing that you have to figure out, here's an important note.
Okay.
The biggest thing that you need to figure out is your cost per transaction.
Okay.
In other words, you take your operating costs, if it's $100,000 and then you divide it by the number of transactions you do.
Okay.
And let's say it's 10, so it's $1,000 a transaction. But you got to take your operating costs and you got to figure out what those are before you even it doesn't matter that your neighbor pays 50% and somebody else pays their agent 70, and you may only be able to afford to pay your agents 40% for all the value you offer. But if you don't know what your cost per transaction is, this is where most people get into trouble. Then, what are you going to measure it to? Right. How are you going to make that decision about what you should pay?
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to run out of time here. I
Yeah,
want to just, for people listening out there that are interested in coming to one of your events, you have an
yeah.
event coming up
Yes, next
um,
week.
next week, and by the time this airs, that will probably be behind us. So, what's
Yeah.
the event coming after that?
Well, we have business planning in Las Vegas in December, the first week in December, and then we have business planning in Toronto in November, if anybody's in the Canadians. So we have those two coming up right now that they are. Yeah.
Awesome. And if somebody is interested in, learning more about coaching with you personally, where
Yes.
do they need to go and how do they apply?
Right. So the company is goodfellowcoachingandconsulting.com. And I'm Ken Goodfellow, and you can also reach me, ken@goodfellowcoaching.com or
Awesome.
shirley@goodfellowcoaching.com. And yeah, by all means, give us a call. We'll certainly be happy to have a conversation with you. Love this business and love coaching. So
And one of the things that when I went to the first event with Ken, um, Shirley is amazing. She taught me a lot about recruiting over the years and a lot about finding the right people. But what I noticed about your personal mindset, Ken, is that there's no, you'll bring other coaches in and put them on your stage. You have absolutely no fear of other people taking the spotlight because you know how much value you provide. And I love that about you. It's like, an inner confidence that you make a difference that just has always really resonated with me. So thank you
thank
for
you.
all you've contributed to my business.
Thank you, Keri. I mean, you're a bright light in the business, and honored to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much.